Next, we have Greer Morgan Gainer, the title, Reconfiguring Legibility, on the Rhizome with Graphic Design. Raised in the dry plains of the high desert, Greer Morgan Gainer seeks connections across things that easily get overlooked. Moving from a background in anthropology, media studies, and book arts, she whispers with typefaces to untangle the mysteries of typographic convention and the relationship between the application of word forms and subjective experiences. A font nerd, she is not. While the form fulfills its florist function, she is more interested in the conditions that impact and inform the interplay of text, image, and viewership than on the wacky ways that text can talk.
Hi, everyone. To start today, I would like to ask you to read this. You may have pieced together, don't mistake legibility for communication. This was graphic designer David Carson's motto in the early 1990s when he participated in design discussions that aimed to interrupt habitual modes of seeing graphic design. Carson's typography, that is his application of the letter forms, foregrounds type as performative. His type does as well as says, which complicates easy reading and instigates a so-called illegible design. So today, I want to discuss the actions associated with illegible typography. I will focus on American designs from the early 1980s and into the 90s, when American designers contested illegibility as a productive mode of communication. I will make a cumulative argument about the actions produced in typographic applications. The designs you will see reveal typography that does something. Instead of focusing on what these works mean, I choose to focus on their subsequent action. The designs that you are about to see call us, the public, into action. They present typographic forms that ask us to see them and to participate in what they do. And what they do is conduct ideas. So let's see where typographic action may take us. Large letters hang upside down. If we read the way that we are taught, from left to right, we encounter the large, dark, hanging letter forms. Searching for cohesion, your eyes may come to an X formed by crossed lines of illegible type. The X points to a photograph of a goggled child running alongside a pool in the lower right. As he runs, another child jumps into the water, feet suspended in the air. A smaller photograph, just to the left, reinforces the notion of a lively pool scene, as another body dives into the water, legs splayed. Dangling letter forms are strewn apart, lying like the sloughed-off skin and greasy tracings of bodies in a pool. Slowly, we can start to build syllables from the tracings. Ging, anging, at, car, mine. Word fragments sit on the left and tether the text. Text sits on one side, while it hangs on the other, tossed and turned as if in water, supporting the idea of hanging at a public pool. The typography extends the meaning of a magazine article's title, Hanging at Carmine Street. David Carson intensifies the communicative function of letter forms in this magazine page spread. He makes the text do more than say. He destabilizes the distinction between text and image and reformulates our reading of the letter forms. Suddenly, we see the typographic forms rather than just the words they express. In gathering the scattered forms, we are called into action to generate the title of an article about a pool on Carmine Street in Greenwich Village. Hanging at Carmine Street appeared in Beach Culture magazine in 1991. Published in the early 1990s, Beach Culture barely made it to its sixth final issue. The magazine only obliquely referenced the surfer community, profession, and advertising sector for which it was conceived. Envisioned as an advertorial offshoot of Surfing magazine, the publisher had little interest in Beach Culture's editorial and design content. The magazine became an experiment between editor Neil Feineman and art director and designer David Carson. Feineman and Carson utilized the freedom of a hands-off publisher to, as Feineman discusses, propagate a refusal to blindly accept authority or limitations at face value. Carson's designs, seen in these spreads, communicate through deconstructed and ambiguous layers of information. Carson makes the reader search for the content. He extends the magazine's anti-authoritarian intention by engaging the reading public to make sense from his nonlinear typography. In reading, we become co-authors of a somewhat cryptic communication. Carson's complex and layered typography interrogates the communicative function of type. As readers of Hanging at Carmine Street, we had to shift our mode of reading letter forms. We moved away from linguistic, linear construction towards accumulation of form in order to activate the content. Carson was not the first to communicate in this cumulative way. Designed 10 years earlier, while she was a student at Cranbrook Academy of Art, Lucille Tenaza's Berry Drugs pushes accumulation further. Word fragments, lifted from commercial signage, populate the visual field in each section, in various sizes and orientations. The forms do not connect through a linear understanding the way that text usually functions, though each form responds with those surrounding it. The visual field could be reduced down to a multitude of recognizable entities, mimicking imagery, or evoking specifics to make connections across the forms. But Tenaza's design does not guide the viewer towards one specific point. If anything, it opens up into many, even as words materialize and repeat. I have chosen not to guide your eyes through these images. You get to insert meaning, or not, as your eyes gather and order the information. In this way, a subjective rendering of the content is made possible. The text forms are unhinged from a specified message. So what is being mobilized in this functional destabilization of the letter forms? Tenaza's and Carson's design span a time when American graphic designers examined the dynamics between image and text, and the dynamics between designer and audience. Their graphic queries presented competing layers of information. Text was to be seen, and images were to be read. This destabilization intended to engage the reading audience in generating their own sense of meaning from a fractured typographic surface. The designs prompted one particular critic to dismiss the emerging generation of design production as outright ugly, a description that could be lobbed at this design, Carson's table of contents from the last issue of Beach Culture. Muddled layers of fragmented text and sentences overlay numbered grids, which overlay more text, producing a cacophony of letter and number parts. This aggregation activates us, the public audience, to find our own way through the information. This notion of engaging the public through illegibility came to fore during the so-called great legibility debates of the 1990s. I'm sure that you've all heard of these debates. In case you haven't, or you need a refresher, the story goes like this. In the late 60s and early 70s, this man, Wolfgang Weingart, started playing with typographic forms in Basel, Switzerland. He created designs like this one, which combines multiple letters into single, successive letter-like forms. His typographic process series 1 through 5 exhibits Weingart's intention that typography should extend the expressive content of a design. Weingart's letter forms tread a fine line between expression and loss of content. The forms of text themselves are used to construct a sense of meaning rather than building words. They build ideas through sensation. Weingart stretched the legibility of type forms to render an expressive experience in design rather than a straightforward communication. His Swiss punk typography reacted against the international style that came out of Switzerland post-World War II. International style utilizes clear, legible typography and adheres to what is referred to as the grid, seen here in Carlo Vivarelli's cover for a graphic design quarterly. Designs in this style aim to communicate through rational, non-emotive, universalized, or non-ideological modes. International style graphic design is seen as a reaction against, for one thing, the Nazi appropriation of fraktur typefaces for propaganda purposes. Here, we see seven different forms of fraktur designed by Rudolf Koch. This one, Valau, is similar to the fraktur applied in this poster. Fraktur forms visually historicized the constructed ideal of Aryan purity. International style typography, on the other hand, leveraged universality to present a clean, non-political slate as a response to such nationalistic fervor. Sans serif typefaces, such as Accidens Grotesque, strengthened the unfettered international style designs. Additionally, the use of photography bolstered the idea of transparency in communication. Legible text and photographic images situated within the grid system present individual items in rationalized place. Here, square photographs are surrounded by, but completely separated from, the text boxes around them. Weingart, the Swiss punk, pushed against this hyper-rationality and questioned the grid through typographic expressionism. In the late 70s, two of his American students, April Greiman and Dan Friedman, brought his intuitive, playful approach to American soil. In one of Friedman's designs, seen here, we see type afloat in an urban space. The type forms emerge from and fall onto the street scene. Through his American students, as well as his own stateside teaching, Weingart's Swiss punk style took hold in certain design communities in California and Michigan in the 70s and 80s, primarily in design schools. The Design Academy was working through post-structuralist theory as they questioned the function of design in the social field. Jacques Derrida's deconstruction in particular found traction, and many designs from this time period are referred to as deconstructed typography. And the story continues. Then came this, the Apple Macintosh computer. In 1984, designers began to use the Macintosh and its associated software in design production. The trifecta of Swiss punk typographic expressionism, critical theory, and the mutability of information in the digital environment produced designs like Carson's hanging at Carmine Street. In the digital environment, space and time are rendered into the same binary ones or zeros. Text becomes image, becomes text, or so the story goes. When I first saw Carson's hanging at Carmine Street, the letter forms, like whirlpools of information, hooked me. I started off settling for the historical framework to understand his design. But though his contemporaries were involved in computer-aided design, at this point, Carson, a self-taught designer, barely used the computer. If we return to the table of contents, at the time that he designed this, Carson was still using photographic means to create paste-ups that he sent to the print shop. The chaotic and ornately layered information looks more like an analog printer's make-ready rather than an index for a digitally designed magazine. Number blocks overprint layered fragments of article titles set in crossing and orientations. It is nearly impossible to see any one thing in this design other than a multidimensional form that questions its own function. Though Carson participated in a visuality that could be considered responsive to the digital age, and though he is discussed, however begrudgingly, as the designer that exemplified the so-called illegible designs, explaining his work through the lens of technological determinism or digital visuality discounts the actions in his design. Though I have just repeated the story that supposedly produced this layering, I think designs such as Carson's and Tanaza's require a second or third descriptive layer, maybe even endless layers, to reactivate these designs in a manner they command, because they are doing many things. Rather than seeing through design to find out what it means, here we see design. The typography renders visible the design discipline as it calls us, the public, into action. And by repeatedly scrambling the message, it demonstrates the conductive enterprise of graphic design. These typographic applications show design as a production based on conducting ideas from one place to another, or several, from designer to readers and the indefinable public produced by seeing this design. These designs perform and question the conductive position design articulates between audience and message through typographic means. So, Rather than seeing and discussing these illegible designs as representational, linguistic communications, we can re-articulate them in their historical narrative by seeing them as conductive activations that render visible the dynamic actions of contemporary design. That design does something. For all of the designs we have seen today, the storyline that is relied upon to explain them stops short of what these typographic applications perform. These works perform the discipline of design, which I contend is a conductive rather than a substantial discipline. Seeing design as conductive essentially renders it empty. It lacks substance. It means nothing because it does more than it says. That is why we, the public addressed and conjured by contemporary design, ought to pay attention to how and what it does. Design in myriad forms has moved inconspicuously into many layers of contemporary life. It is crucial to see what design, through text or through image, interaction, or object, is doing to us, the public, summoned into action. Thank you.